Nebraska apparently back in 2021, after COVID and the coronavirus and everything else, had a thought that they wanted to possibly leave the Big Ten and go to back to the Big 12. Now, the athletic director, Bill Moos, was driven by extreme frustration with the Big Ten and their reaction to COVID-19 and possibly not playing any football that season and some other reasons that he lists in the book. Unfortunately, I do not have the book, so I can't say that I know everything that's in there. I've just seen a select few pages that have been posted on X, as I'm sure other people have, but sounds like this was mostly due to frustration with the Big Ten and some of their decision making in COVID. Talks about some of the cultural and strategic fits of the conference overall. Once they got there, they recognized that they were not, they were not culturally as connected as maybe some other teams are, which I feel like is kind of a given. You go into a conference and stuff like that. It is what it is. And then leadership frustrations too, with the Big Ten communication, decision making, and shocker, Kevin Warren. They did not like Kevin Warren. Us too, Nebraska. Nobody liked Kevin Warren. So sorry. You feel like I'm being really mean to Kevin Warren right there, but it's just true. Nobody liked him.
He ruined football for like a year.
Yes, he did.
Like literally.
Yes, he did. So, Zach, we'll talk about if a team could ever leave the Big Ten here in just a moment, but I want to first get your reaction to the whole Nebraska situation, everything that went on there. And do you think, and then answer me, do you think something like this could ever happen again, to where a team in the Big Ten says, maybe I'm not going back to the conference I was at before, but I no longer want to be in the Big Ten and I want to go to the SEC, the ACC, or something like that?
Yeah. So you're asking about, did it make sense for Nebraska to consider it?
Yeah, your reaction to that whole story and everything else from
the book. So I think my initial thought was, wow, Bill Moos was not a good athletic director. That was my.
It's crazy to write. I will say it's crazy to write a book and mention one of the stupidest ideas ever as like, this was my idea. But sorry, go ahead. I'm interrupting you.
Well, so that was my knee jerk, and my other knee jerk was like, it's a terrible idea. I think if you actually step back though and think about the timing, I'm not saying I would advocate for it at all, but think about where they were in 2021. They're knee deep in Scott Frost. So, I mean, they're like, we're not making fun, but like, we're disappointed in Nebraska right now under Matt Rule. I mean, they're at least competitive most of the time. Obviously not the last few games of the season, but like, I mean, they were competitive up to the last 30 seconds of every game, or they were getting blown out. Like, that's what it was. That was the Scott Frost experience. And you had that. They were the only ones to go to bat for football in the Big Ten outside of Ohio State. Like, they were the ones really banging the drum. So they felt isolated just from a desire to play football. Mm-hmm. They legitimately were they are isolated in the sense of like being geographically isolated. Like, they're further away than people realize from almost everybody else in the Big Ten. A lot of their recruiting bases are no longer natural connections, right? So Nebraska would play Texas, they'd play Oklahoma. And that was where a lot of their recruits came from. Obviously, they got a lot of recruits from California too, but not like, you're nowhere near California. Like, you're going to the Midwest and you're not going to Texas or Oklahoma anymore. You're going to Ohio. Ohio kids aren't going to Nebraska. Like, Pennsylvania kids aren't going to Nebraska. So it wouldn't have made sense for the reason why they left in the first place, which is to have the backing, or like the financial foundation, and that was solidified with the Big Ten, whereas the Big 12 was it was always sinking sand. Like it's still a ticking time bomb in some ways. But and this might lead into where we go in the discussion. At that particular time and place for Nebraska, I can see why someone as an athletic director trying to think about what was best for his school could see why going back could actually be a viable and maybe even helpful short-term solution.
If finances were not a thing at all, I could see it, right? If the financial structure of the conference and where it was going and everything else was not a thing at all, then I could see it. But even back then in, the early 2020s, 2021, it was clear that the Big Ten was a conference that was not they were not content with not being one of the premier conferences out there. And at that time, the Big 12 did have some more firepower, so it could have possibly made sense. We're kind of looking back on this with our Big Ten eyes now, which is it's the best conference in college football, and I don't think there's a doubt about that. Maybe some SEC fans would disagree with me, but I think most college football fans recognize that at this point. And everything with Kevin Warren, probably didn't give them a whole lot of, confidence and everything else. So if we're going to transition to the question now of like, would a team ever leave the Big Ten? I don't think so now. Maybe you would leave to like go to the SEC or something like that. Obviously, we've had rumors of, Michigan not being happy after the Connor Stallion stuff happened and everything. USC was unhappy with the public capital, what everybody was calling the private equity, UC investments deal and everything like that. So there was talk about them possibly leaving as well. But at the end of the day, unless something huge that your school just fundamentally disagrees with like that happens, and I don't think the Big Ten's going to do anything to make themselves lose members like that. Unless something like that happens, I don't see a team leaving the Big Ten, especially with the grant of rights and everything else that they have here. The only way I could see a team leaving the Big Ten is if, some of these schools don't want to be locked up in the grant of rights for a long period of time. Do we ever get to the point where teams almost go from conference to conference, kind of like contract to contract, right? Do we ever get to the point where the Big 12 says, hey, in order to get more money, we need to bring in a premier brand with a large media market. Let's go tell USC, hey, we'll pay you $100 million a year to be in our conference for 7 years, right? Because if we're going to pay you that and our TV deal on top of that, that would look pretty enticing. Now, I don't think USC would do it. There's obviously so much more that goes into a conference than just football. There's research dollars and everything else. So right. I think that would prevent it. But I do think that with everything happening in college football the way it is, and with conferences kind of getting shaky and a little weird, I do think there would someday possibly be an opportunity for a conference to say, we're only going to survive if we get one of these bigger brands to come over to our conference. Maybe it's not for the long term, but maybe for the short term, and put them over there. I don't think it would happen. In fact, I think it's probably more likely, as Max is talking about there, that somebody would get kicked out of the Big Ten rather than somebody would leave the Big Ten. But I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're going to see I can't think of the word that I'm thinking of, but the dissolving of conferences maybe sooner rather than later. So
you're saying like the Pac-12 did?
Pac-12. I think the ACC.
I think the Big 12 in a few years. Yeah.
Yeah. The Big 12 seems, I said they're in sinking sand. They're more in sinking sand in terms of relevance. But I still think at some point there is a reality that the SEC and the Big Ten become like the two-pronged NFL light. Like I just think that's where we're headed. But until
if they can start to get along, then it's
yeah.
Can those two entities, coexist?
There's going to be a street fight at some point, and then they'll yeah.
I would love to see Tony Petiti versus Greg Sankey street fight.
Let them fight. Sorry.
Getting you excited now.
The old Godzilla, Ken Watanabe. Anyway, I can see your thought. Like before we get there, could teams be contracted for hire? Maybe. I do think that's possible because again, what greed before people are like, that would never happen. Like, do you see what's happening in college football right now? Like,
People also never thought USC would go to the Big Ten. People also never thought
yeah,
that, the
people never
Pac-12 would
thought
just fall apart. Yeah.
people never thought that college players would legally be paid $4 million a year.
Yeah.
Like, if we're going to question any viability, then we just need to say, hey, do you just look at what's happening? But here's, I think, another possibility, and it's not necessarily that a team would get kicked out, although I think that's possible too. But I'm going to go back to that Nebraska example. I think there are teams or programs where they could be like in danger of their football program becoming completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
But they're financially stable. And so they say, okay, we want to find a way to use the resources we have to ascend, but we may not be able to do it in the Big Ten, where the Big Ten has become the premier conference in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And like look at Northwestern, for instance. What Northwestern has done is remarkable. But they're going 2-10 this season.
Yeah.
Like
3-9,
maybe 3-9.
They got Rutgers on their schedule. They could go 4-8. Sorry, go ahead.
But okay, but like that's so like a team like Northwestern, a team like Rutgers, a team like I dare not say Nebraska because I do think there are better opportunities for Nebraska. But like Purdue, where you're like, I'm not sure, without naming Kurt Cignetti, a Kurt Cignetti unicorn coming in and transforming the program overnight, I'm not sure you ever get to a place like a higher tier unless you're in a conference that allows you to, right? So like, look at Rutgers in the old Big East. Like, remember how Greg Schiano got them to number 6 in the country, and everyone's like, oh, Greg Schiano, that's the greatest season ever. I still argue, no, the greatest season that Greg Schiano's ever had was going 7-6 against the Big Ten East because it was against the freaking Big Ten East. And he beat Miami out of conference. He beat Virginia Tech out of conference. But no one sees it that way because he went 7-6.
Yeah.
Like, they might need to move levels so that they can gain respectability and gain recruiting prowess.
Maybe. I do think in the Big Ten, you have the opportunity with, the manageable schedules that come up, right? And just unfortunate for Rutgers that happened in a year when they had a ton of injuries. So that was the most unlucky thing for them. But like a team like Iowa is who I look at as they benefit the most from being in the Big Ten right now because they are 8-4, 9-3 every single year. But all it takes is that 1 year for them to go 10-2, 11-1.
Could have been this year.
It could have been this year. If they beat Iowa State and a couple plays go different in that Oregon game, could have been. They could have been in the playoffs 10-2, right? But it just didn't work out for them. I do think as the Big Ten continues to grow and gain more prestige, a team like Iowa, and that's why for me, like, we get people sometimes that come on here and say, like, I'm never going to root for my conference. I only root for my team. And I get that. Like, Zach and I, we're not like the biggest, like, root for your conference people out there, but we also recognize that a good conference is good for teams. Teams like Wisconsin, Wisconsin back in the day, maybe not Wisconsin now, but teams like Iowa, Illinois right now, teams like that are the teams that need the conference to be at its best right now more than anything, because those are the type of teams that if they go 10-2, they might not make the playoffs. But if the conference looks really good and people more thought process and prestige for it, then you could see an Illinois that's 10-2. You could see an Iowa that is 10-2 get to the playoffs. But I don't think that would have happened 4 years ago when the Big Ten wasn't winning national championships. I think if Iowa went 10-2, people would be like, "Yeah, okay, good story." I mean, you saw how people reacted to Indiana 11-1. They almost didn't put them in.
Yep.
And that was after the Big Ten won a national championship. So,
yeah,
Fight on Natty says, JR Zach, which program is more beneficial? Rutgers to stay in the conference or to try and get Boston College? Rutgers is definitely more beneficial because of the media market, and also Rutgers actually pays for their college football program. Rutgers is top 6 in the Big Ten and money that they allocate to their football program. I don't think a lot of people know that. They do put in a lot of money for it. It's just it's not worked out for them, obviously, the past few years. They had a tough schedule last year, and then, like I said, 2 years ago was kind of their favorable schedule they could work with, but didn't work out for them with the injuries and everything.
Yeah. I know you did a video on their defensive coordinator hire, but I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Bobby Hawk, right? It's a guy from the FCS coming in, And the thing I like about it most is, like, these are guys that are used to not working with the premier talents of, like, the 5 stars, like Ohio State. Like, I understand why Ohio State goes to the NFL, because these guys are used to working with some of the most premier talent out there and talent equated matchups, which is what Ohio State needs to go to, if they want to win the playoffs and everything else. USC is the same way, right? Oregon, Indiana right now, like all these teams right now. I mean, Indiana's not got the recruiting there yet, but they're kind of the blueprint of, like, get guys from a lower level who had to work really, really hard with less talented guys to develop them and put them in good positions to win. And you can go out and beat some of the best teams out there. And to me, that's what Illinois and Rutgers is trying to do right now. I think it's a good model. Everybody's trying to copy Indiana right now in a different way. That's the thing. Like, Indiana, everybody's trying to copy them in a different way.
The only problem with that is, do they have a Kurt Signetti?
Well, no. That's the biggest problem. The thing you need to copy the most is Kirk Cinetti, but he's not. Nobody clones him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you. It's like, we need to do what Indiana did. Here's what Indiana did. They got the best coach in college football.
Yeah.
It's like, we need to copy what Alabama did. Guys, you don't have Nick Saban. Sorry.
It's true.
Don't even have Dabo at this point, right? That good Dabo, not old, decrepit, falling apart Dabo, who's get off my lawn. Yeah, stop tampering with my players, which actually, amen. Stop tampering. Yeah.
But last question, and this will make some fan bases mad, and that's okay. I'm okay with it.
Oh dear.
If you had to kick
people are already mad at me for not wearing this wig that they gave out at the Illinois game. So we're already off to a good start that way.
Yeah, the Illinois fans will be fine. Don't worry. If you had to kick one team out of the Big Ten, who is it?
Oh no, you did it. Oh,
I have my answer. Do you want me to answer first?
Please.
Purdue.
You want Purdue?
They don't have a whole lot of NIL for basketball. I think after Braden Smith and the guys are gone, I think you're really relying on basically Matt Painter to do a really good job with less talented guys, because you don't have as much money for it. He can, don't get me wrong. He's a really good coach. But I think you're relying on that. The football program doesn't have the most money invested in it. It's not a large media market. And, if I could trade Purdue for Notre Dame,
that's fair.
I mean, can the Big Ten, with all this, like, media market stuff, can they really justify having 3 teams from Indiana in there? I mean, and none of them are in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
So,
I would. I have a top 3.
Oh, you just want to make everybody mad. Okay.
Yeah. Well, because I think here's the thing.
Bubba says Purdue's crazy. Why is Purdue crazy? Who would you pick, Bubba? I don't know if he's saying crazy good or crazy bad. I'm wondering. Matt
He's
Painter's.
saying Matt Painter's.
Hey, I give Matt Painter his flowers. I said even if they didn't have a talented roster, they still work with Nick because Matt Painter's a good coach. All right, who's your three?
Well,
Here.
so I think Purdue is honorable mention for me, but
Okay.
I do think Northwestern is a tough fit because of the academics.
I think the research dollars they bring into the conference.
I think that's a really
I don't
good
think you
point.
can get rid of those.
Yeah. But they wouldn't be my top choice. Northwestern wouldn't be my top choice, but that's a really good point. And yeah. But I think that the two that stand out the most, one I hate to say, and the other one I'm like, I don't care. The one I hate to say is Rutgers, because I just think from the beginning, it's been more about media market than it has been about program. But I like Rutgers and I want them to stay. But the one that I really don't care about is Maryland, which Fight on Natties was like.
I thought you were going to say UCLA. Argraw saying UCLA. We already have the market. I thought that's what you were going to say.
You thought I was going to say UCLA? Or
Yeah,
no. I thought the UCLA USC tech. If you're going to kick out one West Coast school, you almost have to kick them all out.
Yeah, it doesn't work without 4 out
there.
Yeah,
that's why as soon as when they got USC and UCLA, you had to go out and get at least a few more Pac-12 schools, West Coast schools. You couldn't. So you can get rid of Maryland in a heartbeat, and it wouldn't affect anything. You could get rid of Rutgers, and again, I don't want Rutgers to go, but
yeah, I do think Rutgers, the media market in New Jersey and New York, I think you need to keep that, and they do spend money.
Excellent.
So I don't necessarily agree with the Rutgers one, but I kind of see what you're saying. I think Maryland is probably the answer outside of Purdue, because I do think Maryland fans would agree that they would rather go to the ACC.
Yeah.
Well, they just fit better. Go ahead.
Let me ask just this question, and then we can end. Are TV media markets as important now as they were 5, 10, 15 years ago?
I think so. I was talking about this on an episode the other day. I think so, because I do think it gives you a base. I do think that TV markets give you a base, and I do think that like TV companies still say, all right, if you have a team that's in, Baltimore or outside of DC, that's Maryland, you're going to get a lot of people from that DC market type of deal, right? Rutgers, you're going to get a lot of people from that big market there. Now, it doesn't always mean you are going to get them, but you at least have a base there of people that know and recognize that team. And if that team ever gets good, they're going to watch all the other Big Ten games too.
Yeah. So okay. So hearing you say that, I think that's helpful. I'd probably shift to my top two being Purdue and Maryland.
Yeah.
Like those would be my two, because Maryland does give you DC and Baltimore, but they're just so non-competitive year after year.
A few years ago, they were okay. They won.
Yeah,
they won 3 bowl games in a row.
The Talia years.
Those were impactful.